So you've probably seen it by now, right? That viral video of two Indian medical students just dancing their hearts out down a hospital hallway to this, amazing 70s disco song. That song, Boney M's Rah Rah Rasputin. It blew up, it was everywhere, but it also made a whole lot of people stop and ask a pretty simple question. Who exactly was this Rasputin guy in the song? You know, the song paints this picture of the lover of the Russian queen, a real powerhouse, a machine, just this figure surrounded by mystery. But that's the pop culture version. The real story, oh, it's way darker, so much stranger, and honestly, more unbelievable than any disco track could ever hope to be. So, that's the big question, isn't it? Was he really the queen's lover? Was he a holy man who had actual divine gifts? Or was he some kind of manipulative devil who helped bring down an entire empire? Well, let's try to peel back a century of myths and see if we can find the real man behind the legend. And the best place to start, believe it or not, is actually at the end of his story. Because the most famous thing about Rasputin isn't really his life, it's his death. The legend says he was a man who just refused to die. Okay, so get this. This incredible story isn't just some made-up rumor. This is the account told by his killers themselves. They said they fed him enough cyanide to drop several men, but nothing. He just kept eating. So they shot him, point blank, right in the chest. When they went to check on the body a little later, he supposedly leaped up, roaring, and tried to strangle his attacker before escaping out into the snow. They had to shoot him again in the back, then in the head, beat him with a club, and even then, to be sure, they threw him into a freezing river. I mean, listen to that. That's a direct quote from the man who led the murder plot, Prince Felix Yusupov. You can just feel the pure terror in his words. For them, they weren't just killing a man. They felt like they were trying to put down a demon. And that story, right there, is what cemented the myth of Rasputin, the unkillable monster. So, how does a person even become that kind of myth? Who was he before he became this legend? To figure that out, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning, to one of the most remote and brutal places on the entire planet. Grigori Rasputin started his life as a simple peasant in Siberia. And we're talking about a place where the temperature can swing from 93 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer all the way down to 96 below in the winter. I mean, that's an environment that forges a totally different kind of person. Someone tough, someone used to extremes. And, you know, right from the start, his life is just murky. Even the reason he first left his village is completely up for debate. Did he get a holy vision from the Virgin Mary telling him to become a pilgrim? Or was he just a common criminal, a horse thief on the run from the law? The truth is, we just don't know. And that ambiguity is kind of the whole story with him. Whatever the real reason, he set out on this spiritual journey, but it was a really dark one. He wandered Russia, basically torturing his own body. He learned hypnotism from another mystic, and this is the really critical part. He apparently fell in with the Khlisti, a secret, outlawed religious cult. Their core belief was shocking. They believed that to get closer to God, you first had to sin, and sin big. The greater the sin, the greater the repentance. This idea, salvation through sinning, would pretty much define the rest of his life. So when he came back from all this wandering, he was a totally changed man, and people noticed. But above everything else, they noticed his eyes. People who met him said they had never, ever felt a stare so intense, so hypnotic. Yeah, his power was all centered on this stare. People claimed he could literally make his pupils expand whenever he wanted, giving his gaze this, unholy intensity. It was this charisma, this almost supernatural presence, that became his greatest tool. It's what made people believe he could heal the sick, see the future, and maybe even talk directly to God. Okay, so how did this strange, wandering mystic with the crazy eyes become the most powerful man in all of Russia? Well, his reputation as a healer started to spread, and it eventually reached the ears of the two most desperate people in the entire empire, the Tsar and Tsarina. And why were they so desperate? It all came down to this. Their only son, Alexei, the heir to the whole Russian throne, had severe haemophilia. Every little bump, every scrape could cause uncontrollable internal bleeding and put him in agonizing pain. And all the best doctors in Europe, they were completely helpless. And then in walks Rasputin. During one of the boy's life-threatening episodes, Rasputin was brought to the palace, and somehow he stopped the bleeding. Now, to this day, the most logical explanation is that he used his hypnotic skills to calm the boy down, which would lower his blood pressure and let the bleeding subside. But to the Tsarina Alexandra, it wasn't hypnosis. It was a straight-up miracle. And from that moment on, Rasputin had the Tsarina's total, unwavering devotion. To her, he was a man of God, the only one who could keep her son alive. And her devotion gave him unbelievable power. The logic was simple, right? He controlled her, she controlled the pretty weak-willed Tsar, and through them, Rasputin was effectively running the Russian Empire. He was appointing and firing government ministers whenever he wanted, especially once Russia got into World War I. So just imagine this. A peasant from Siberia is now basically running the country. The Russian nobility watching this unwashed, scandalous mystic calling the shots and shaming the monarchy, they finally decided they'd had enough. A conspiracy was born, not with revolutionaries, but inside the royal family itself. But just like everything else with this guy, even the story of his death is way more complicated than it seems. Sure, Prince Yusupov took all the public credit, saying he did it for patriotic reasons. But other theories are out there. One Grand Duke had a personal grudge because Rasputin blocked his marriage. And then you've got the wildest theory, that British spies from MI6 delivered the final bullet because they were terrified Rasputin would convince the Tsar to pull Russia out of the war, a move that could have lost the Allies everything. But the story doesn't just end with his body being pulled from that frozen river. Oh, no. In a way, that's when his power became absolute. Because weeks before he was murdered, Rasputin made one last, absolutely terrifying prophecy. He wrote a letter to the Tsar, and it was just chillingly specific. He warned him that if he were killed by nobles, by the Tsar's own family, then the Tsar's entire family would be destroyed within 2 years, and they would be killed by the Russian people. And the accuracy of that prediction is horrifying. Rasputin was murdered in December 1916 by the Tsar's relatives. Just a few months later, the revolution explodes. And then, in July 1918, just over 18 months after Rasputin's death, the Tsar, the Tsarina, and all 5 of their children were executed. A 300-year-old dynasty just gone. Exactly like the Mad Monk said it would be. You see, his death didn't erase him, it made him immortal. 100 years later, his name isn't some historical footnote, it's a global brand. You can drink Rasputin vodka, you can eat at a Rasputin-themed restaurant, you can listen to a disco song about him. He's become this permanent, almost mythical fixture in our culture. Which, of course, brings us all the way back to that central question. What was he? A genuine holy man whose faith actually healed a dying child? Or a depraved sinner and a masterful con man who hypnotized an entire empire? And the most fascinating part of his story is that even now, a century later, nobody can really say for sure.